This time I'm gonna wear my glasses so I can actually see what I'm reading. This always helps. Y'all, I gotta tell you, I am thrilled to have Jennifer Roberts here as our guest speaker today. We put her bio in the newsletter, but I'm gonna share a little bit more information about her that I think is important. She graduated from East Mecklenburg High School, went on to attend, East Meck, went on to attend the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill on a Moorhead scholarship. She earned two master's degrees in international affairs from Johns Hopkins University and from the University of Toronto. She worked as a diplomat for 4 years with the United States Department of State. You have my unyielding and undying gratitude for that. Serving in the Dominican Republic as a consular office and then as a political officer in the Mexico desk before returning to Charlotte. During her years in Charlotte, Roberts has been director of the Mayor's International Cabinet, a lending officer in international corporate banking at First Union, and executive director of the Charlotte World Affairs Council. She is the first person to be elected to serve as both chairman of the Mecklenburg County Commission and later as mayor of Charlotte. Roberts was instrumental in creating a public-private partnership to build a new shelter for survivors of domestic violence here in Charlotte. And this was while she served as the chair of the Mecklenburg County Commission. During her tenure as mayor of Charlotte, she spearheaded the creation of Charlotte Next, an initiative dedicated to improving after-school programs for at-risk teens. During her tenure as mayor, the city of Charlotte set a goal of funding 5,000 affordable housing units over 3 years, and I believe you have exceeded that goal. Roberts has been a lifelong advocate for clean air and water and for environmental justice. She's a recipient of the Maya Angelou Women Who Lead Award, the National Association of Women Business Owners Public Policy Leader of the Year Award, and Equality North Carolina's Ally of the Year Award. She served on the boards of Arts Teach, the Central Iowa Council of Governors, the Charlotte Chamber, the Girl Scouts Hornets Nest Council, Keep Mecklenburg Beautiful, and Women's Commission. She currently works as a business consultant and serves on numerous. I'm just sharing this with y'all because she has lived a full life. She is a volunteer on children's issues, alleviating poverty and homelessness and environmental protection. And I got to tell you, her involvement with Mecklenburg Ministries is how I have the really good fortune to meet her. She hosted an event for MecMin at her beautiful home, opened it up for those of us in attendance. If you ever had the opportunity to go to an event at her home, she is the most gracious hostess in the world. And just, I can't welcome you enough. And thank you for your service. Jennifer Roberts.
I'm not gonna live up to that.
It'll be in the newsletter.
It's all the way downhill from here. I'm gonna have to do like a flip or something. I don't know. Well, I have to say, first of all, what I really love about this group is number 5. Will it be fun? We have way too much dour, terrifying stuff on our plates these days. And so what I'm going to talk about is dour and terrifying. But I'm going to try to put some fun stories in it, because they're stories that will warm your heart and kind of remind us that we have great people working for our board elections and great people making sure our elections are fair, safe, and secure. Hey, look, there's my PowerPoint. Yay!
Awesome.
Right. Okay, and can the people in Zoom land see me still?
Yes.
Okay, I guess I can. Good. Okay, good. Good. And I just do a little advance here.
Yeah, it should be just
Right there.
Right. Well, maybe not.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll try it. You when you say hit it, and I'll do the first one
Okay.
to figure it out. So
Okay.
whenever you're ready.
So currently, I'm doing a whole bunch of stuff, but one of the things that I'm doing is working with a Carter Center, which is based in Atlanta. It's Jimmy Carter's library and his nonprofit, on a democracy initiative. Now, you may know the Carter Center has done a lot of work overseas, monitoring elections in places like Mali and Sudan, Ethiopia. helping fledgling democracies understand what it's like to vote, to have candidates who are civil and know how to campaign, and you don't end up shooting your opponent, which has happened in some countries. And so they have done a lot of work on democracy building, and they call it waging peace, which is absolutely important. And they've also done a lot around disease eradication. Well, in 2020, even before the election, they started hearing from their board and their donors that maybe you should bring your election expertise to the United States. Because we started hearing more of the election conspiracies, of the concern about the machines, of the concern even before November 2020. The lies were starting to circulate, the misinformation, the disinformation, which is deliberate misinformation, it's disinformation. Those started circulating. And so the Carter Center started talking to people around the country to see how they might help support basic democratic norms. And of course, January 6th just reinforced the need to do that. So they started late in 2020. After January 6th, they said, whoa, we need to really double down on this. And they partnered up with Princeton. They have an initiative called the Bridging Divides Initiative, because they're all about using data and real information to formulate policy. Would it help if I shut this door? I noticed there was like a little, I shut this door.
Yeah, bring it food in.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Not if you want to eat.
So they partnered with Princeton and have been looking at how our nation is more and more polarized. And they have, and I'll talk about the criteria they use, but they picked North Carolina to do one of their pilot projects to try to help decrease the number of lies and to get ahead of the misinformation so that we have peaceful elections and we have the peaceful transfer of power, which is the hallmark of democracy. So they called me up a year ago, and a month ago, and said, we want to do this initiative in North Carolina. We want to see if it works because we're really looking at 2024 and we want your help because you know politics, you've been a political figure, people know you, and we want your help. And the first thing I said was, you want a bipartisan group, you want a nonpartisan group, I need a right-leaning partner in this work. And so I found Bob Orr, many of you know him, former North Carolina Supreme Court Justice. He's actually no longer a Republican, which he always announces at our office, I'm now unaffiliated. He left after January 6th, left the party. But he served as a Supreme Court Justice. He was one of the special masters in the redrawing of the congressional districts. So we blame him for that all the time. But that's our contact information. If you want to learn more about this initiative, be part of it. Next slide. Oh, let's see if it works.
Yep, let's see if it works. No, come on now.
PDF, so you should be able to just.
Oh, it's a PDF?
Yes.
Oh,
Oh, you gotta scroll. Okay.
whoa, that's like a really,
Okay, I can scroll.
Is this-
Whoop, too far.
it's very sensitive.
Oh dear. Okay.
Come on now. How about, is that? No?
No. There we go.
Okay.
Okay. So, we'll see if we can scroll. So the other thing I wanted to reinforce is that this didn't start happening with Trump, right? The polarization in our country, if you look at this again is a slide from Pew, a lot of people are doing surveys around the polarization in America. And if you can see, even starting as early as the late 1990s, early 2000s, it's really hard to see this. These are factors that separate viewpoints. And here's race, religion, education, age, gender, political party. And this is based on surveys of people's trust and sense of polarization and how different people are. The political party we've become further and further apart. And this didn't start happening with Trump. Why? Next slide. I know, this is tricky.
Oh, man, this thing, why is it
Yeah.
doing this?
It's hard to.
Oh, now it's working. All right, that's your
Okay.
next slide.
Here we go. Yeah.
Down arrow.
Yeah.
It wasn't
Down
working,
arrow.
it
Okay,
wasn't working
great.
a second ago, but it is now, so.
Okay. So what are some of the reasons we've gotten here? Our demographics are changing. We're a much more diverse country. You know, 1 in 5 marriages is an interracial marriage. Ooh, isn't that awesome? I think it's awesome. Anyway, so we've got more diverse, we've got closed media ecosystems. Fox and MSNBC both started the same year, 1996. So you can see, starting in 2000 is when the polarization really started to take off. Our media is a big part of that. We also have income inequality because our tax structure is unfair. We have a growing awareness of racial inequality with the police shootings we've seen, with so much awareness being raised. The declining trust in all kinds of institutions. You saw the whole public health declining trust during COVID, and we are starting to segregate ourselves in our communities. So people are moving to Texas because they want to be the Republicans, and people are moving to Massachusetts because they want to be with Democrats. I mean, we are segregating ourselves. Great separation, and then the replacement theory, which you've heard about. As people of color and women gain more power, gain more notice, white people feel that they're losing their power and their group status. And that is terrifying. And that's, to them, that's where the whole replacement theory comes from. It's this fear that I'm not going to be heard anymore. Everybody else's agenda is going to take over. Next slide. In North Carolina, we see that with what's going on in our schools, mask and critical race theory, redistricting. We have a split government with the governor and the General Assembly at odds. We have faith-based exclusions to a lot of things, including education, racial injustice, the gerrymandering, which we're like the national example of gerrymandering. And then the urban-rural divide is very big as well. Sorry, let me see if I can do this.
Oh, you're fine.
Oh, mine's right there. Okay.
I can chew and walk.
Most of the top part of that is that not just the polarization, but the willingness of people to resort to violence, at least when they answer a survey, they say they're willing. And what we've seen with right-wing militia, and there's some left-wing militia, but the right wing is there are about 9 times as many groups on the right. And this survey, they found that more than half Republicans are willing to use violence if they think their way of life is disappearing. And that's terrifying. All right, let's see if I can do this. It's
This one.
oh, come on. Okay, I messed up.
There we go. That's
Just that one. Oh, yay, okay. So Princeton looked at, again, using data, they looked at different factors, and just like your financial advisor will tell you, past results are no prediction of future results. The same is true of political violence. So we know that if you look at polarization and social trust and the divisions we have there, if you look at mobilization, our willingness to protest, mobilization does not always mean violence. So then they look at potential for violence based on past history, Greensboro, Wilmington, Alamance. I mean, we had a bunch of violence erupt. And then political relevance is there a major election with a lot of outside money coming in? Wonder if that could be in North Carolina. We have a couple of those. We have the Ted Budd, Sherry Beasley race. We have Wiley Nickel and Bo Hines. So we used to have Madison Cawthorn, no longer. But we have enough of that going on. So they actually ranked counties. There are 3,143 counties in the country. We have this many in the top 112. Only Florida and I think maybe Arizona were higher. So we are very high up based on their algorithm. And that is why, and by the way,
what does that represent exactly? Like, I can see some of those are actually more Democratic states.
Well, Wake County is seat of government. And so we get a lot of protests there. So they may be very high on mobilization, but maybe not as high on violence. Alamance may be higher on violence. They had a whole sheriff thing challenge there. Mecklenburg, it's a detailed algorithm, which is not publicly available because there's proprietary information. They get stuff from the FBI, the CIA, and some other things. But we know the ranking of our counties, and you're not surprised by most of those because they're centers of population and also, again, centers of government and a lot of media attention, et cetera. This is an actual photograph from the George Floyd protest the first night. Everybody see this? I don't know if it's an AR-15 or AK-47. Does anybody know? I don't know my weapons, but it's one of the two. And this is a white guy with an American flag and North Carolina flag draped over his back. He's walking down the street. And this is what, during a protest, this is what is concerning to folks who are watching this. So the Carter Center, I already gave you the intro. They were founded right after President Carter left office. They've done work around the world, political. So in 2020, that's when they started to get involved because of our political polarization. What I really want to show you is the next one, and that is a great quote of something I feel like we've lost in our polarization, that bipartisan spirit of democracy. This is a quote from President Reagan, who opened the Carter Center. And he said, "None of us need feel any urge to downplay our differences. On the contrary, we can be proud of them because they arise from goodwill, love of country, concern for the challenges of our time, respect for, and yes, outright enjoyment of the democratic process of disagreement and debate." That's what makes us strong, that diverse viewpoints. From the time of Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton, frank debate has been a part of the tradition of the republic. Today, our very differences attest to the greatness of our nation. I can think of no other country on earth where two political leaders, because Carter and Reagan were standing side by side cutting that ribbon, could disagree so widely yet come together in mutual respect. To paraphrase Mr. Jefferson, we are all Democrats, we are all Republicans because we are all Americans. That is the sentiment that we are trying to restore because the polarization has taken us so far apart. We are demonizing the other side. I've done it. I've called, I'm Republicans, the extremists and all that. Of course, there are very variations within each party. But we have to recognize that there's a reason people don't trust elections. It's not they're stupid, it's not they're mean, it's not that they're easily led by the nose. There's a real reason. And what we're trying to do is to downplay the separation and demonization and get real information in front of people and answer real questions. So we have a big strategy in North Carolina. We want to build a bipartisan leadership team. Here are the other states, by the way. I think we have the best system of any of these. Arizona is not doing town halls. They're that afraid of violence. Florida, Georgia, North Carolina. Georgia is doing a lot through the faith network. They're not doing town halls. We're doing town halls here because we believe in the people in North Carolina. So our strategy is we've got a bipartisan leadership team. I reached out to a bunch of people. Bob reached out to a bunch of people. We have people like Skip Stam, remember him? Very conservative Speaker Pro Tem of the North Carolina House. He is a huge supporter of this initiative. Richard Benroot is on it. Of course, all the Democrats you can think of, but we have gotten Republicans as well. Mitch Kakai, who's the current head of the John Locke Foundation. They believe in democracy. They're helping us message. So we're growing support. We also have partnered with grassroots organizations like Common Cause, the U.S. Veterans Hall of Fame, Red, Wine, and Blue, Braver Angels. A lot of these you may recognize and have heard of. And we've got a two-pronged approach. So one is that there is a website with candidate principles, the basic principles of democracy, to be honest, to be civil, to call out violence when it happens and eschew violence, to train your workers to be civil, campaign workers, and accept the results. When all the votes are counted and recounted and everything, to accept those results. 5 basic principles. We've got a website, people can sign on to that. We're trying to get candidates to sign on. The second part of the strategy is to do a town hall tour, a road show around North Carolina, one in each congressional district. We can't do one in every county. We didn't have time. We started, our first one was August 30th, which was in Wake Forest. But we're doing a road show to get election directors in front of the public, a lot of media coverage. You may have heard me on Charlotte Talks, August 29th, I think it was, with Bob Orr talking about this. You can go back and listen to hear it from him as well. And then we've got, after we finish our tour, the Carter Center is going to have some messaging to share. And I'll show you an example of what they did in 2020. And then we want to keep engaging more people to be spokespeople for this. And so there's Bob and I on Zoom first started working together. And these are some of the folks in our, Harry Taylor, you might recognize, Charlie Jeter, another Republican. We have all these folks in our network who are helping spread the message. These are some of the organizations we've reached out to. I will share that Billy Graham Ministries, even though they're very nice to me, did not want to join the network. But I tried because I met them during some of the protests uptown. They have a whole team of de-escalation ministers that they send out when there are protests. Wonderful people. But they didn't want to be part of the network, but that's okay. We got others. League of Women Voters has been very much a supporter. The U.S. Veterans, the New North Carolina Project, Breaker Angels, all these council of churches. They're all working with us. And here are the principles that we want candidates to sign on to. Honest, civil, secure voting, respect the voters' freedom to vote, don't intimidate them, let both parties have oversight, and then accept the outcome, And if you want to see on the website is pretty easy. It's principled candidates.org. And you can see who signed on. Brian Kemp and Ratzenberger in Georgia have both signed on to these principles. So I don't know who in Arizona has signed. I don't think Mark Fincham signed on, but for those of you, just a few names, people who signed on. They're all on the website. So here are the places that we decided to go in the 14 districts. Not all the big, like one hit some small towns too. We were in Albemarle last night. And the one question we got last night that was from a conspiracy person was, what about electromagnetic interference with those voting machines? But it tells you what's out there, right? What are people hearing? What kind of conspiracy things are they hearing? And someone's bombing us with electromagnetic, interference. Okay.
Or your tinfoil hat.
Yeah, well, but the gentleman from the state board of elections, who was the cybersecurity guy from Woodstar Labs, gave a great answer and said, we have tested. He talked about the process. The machines are tested first. First, they have to be certified by the state board. They're tested in-house. Then they take them out to the community and they let 15 people vote on a fake ballot, and they test and make sure that it's tabulating the right way, right? So they test it on more than 15 probably. They test it and retest it. They do spot audits every election of at least like 2 to 5 precincts every single election, primary, et cetera. They do audits where they hand count and they recount and they check and make sure the machine's working. I mean, he had a great answer. And I think we don't know how many folks those people talk to, but I think our elections for people have been very, very impressive.
So a quick question about just the voting, I know, is it not a closed system? Is it like a singular closed system, or are they on networks, or like?
Great question. So we're going to do, by the way, we're going to do a virtual one on Monday. And if you sign up on the website for the link, even if you can't listen at 7 p.m. on Monday night, you get a copy of the recording. So you'll hear all those questions answered and more. But the key is our machines do not have modems. They are not on the internet. They have a flash drive. By the way, it's an encrypted flash drive specifically made by the company. It gets used once. There are all these like checks and rechecks and balances to make sure that you can't hack the machine. That gets, and some, by the way, some counties are totally paper. They don't have the money for machines. So they're totally paper ballots. They can recount, they can look through again, They've got all the paper they need. But what we find with machines is that tabulation is faster. So when you have 500,000 voters, you know how long it would take to hand count that? A long time.
And a lot of user errors.
And a lot of user errors. Actually, the tabulation is more accurate than the hand count. But they're not on the internet. The only time they upload to the internet is when the county machine, which again is not on the internet, it gets all the flash drives from all the precincts, loads them into that tabulator. Then they take another flash drive with all the tabulated results that's been double checked for viruses. They put that in the machine that's on the internet and upload that to the state website. And by the way, the cyber guy also said, he said, what about hacking the state website? He goes, well, there are threats. We saw threats from Russia. We saw that in 2016. The FBI is monitoring that. They're connecting to the state directors and all that. But the state website is not the final, collector of the votes. Every single county has its votes, and they have it checked, double checked, and secure. So if there ever were a cyber attack on the state website, you can go back to each county and get the actual attack. So there are backups. There's all kinds of security. And this, by the way, is our little cartoon of our bus tour. We're not really going around the Volkswagen bus, but I thought it was really cute.
How do you get a Republican?
That's me and that's Barbara. And when I showed this to my friends, they're like, how come you're not driving? Go women. And the reason is because the photos we gave our artist, I was looking one way and Bob was looking the other way. She wanted us looking at each other. So it was not a nefarious reason. Just a few pictures from some of our events. We've been in historic courthouses in New Bern. Look at this beautiful auditorium. We were in a historic courthouse in Wake Forest. We were in the Chowan County Courthouse in Edenton, and good turnout. In this one, this is Jim Womack, who is head of the Republican Party of Lee County. Film the whole thing. It's on his website or his Facebook page. I think we got great answers. Skip Stam was moderating that one in Wake Forest. The other ones we had, a group of deniers in this one as well. They asked their questions. They got what I thought were great answers. And even if we didn't change their minds, they know there are professionals that are doing this. They know there are checks and balances. There are double checks. There's paper backup. There are audits that happen all the time. I've been very, very impressed. And, I think when you get through 14, Charlotte Talks wants to have us back and hear, what are the things that people are worried about and what are some of the answers. So I got to give you a couple of really fun answers because, gotta have fun. Mm-hmm. So the director from Beaufort County told this great story. What are provisional ballots, right? Well, they are ones that you use if the person doesn't show up in your registration, but they help de-escalate because the person, they get upset. How come not on the registration list? You let them vote. And if you find that you have an internal error, their vote will count. Well, the person in Beaufort County was doing the election in 2020. A couple from New Jersey stopped by on their way to Florida and said, we want to vote for the president. And she said, well, are you registered in North Carolina? No, we're from New Jersey, but we're here and you've got an election thing, so we can vote, right? And she tried to start saying, well, actually you have to vote where you live and you can't vote, unless you've done it as a team, you've got a resident, blah, blah. They started to get angry. And so she said, I'll tell you what, here's a provisional ballot. You can fill this out right now. Here you go. It's got the president on there. We can accommodate you. Of course, they leave, they go to Florida. Ballot doesn't count. But they don't know that. But the provisional ballot is to help reduce that kind of anger. And many times a person will show up and their registration got confused with someone in their family with the same name or whatever, and that ends up counting, or they're in the wrong precinct. You can still count the things that are countywide and statewide they voted for, just not in a specific house district or whatever. So that is a fun story. The other one was the deniers that came into one of the events and said, how come my neighbor got 2 different ballots, same house address, same street address, 2 different ballots. What's up with that? You know, there's some conspiracy. So the election lawyer raises this big tone with election law. He says, well, actually, the law says it's where you lay your head. And what we know is that because of our growth and how many times we change district lines, some precinct lines go right through people's homes. And so if you have a bedroom on one side of the line and a bedroom on the other side of the line, you get 2 different ballots. And we said, now we're not going in there to see who's sleeping where. We gotta take your word for it, but it is a felony if you're lying. And who wants to risk having a felony for something that's silly? But there are houses that get 2 different ballots, and they have to trust you which one, you know, which side you're on.
Hey, Jennifer,
Anyway, we're almost done. We're almost ready for questions.
yeah, just a quick comment.
Yep.
Are you concerned or ever concerned that the person in the first example that you mentioned is somehow testing the system to see if you will provide provisional ballots and then use that against the election system by saying, we told them we were traveling, we weren't residents, but they still provided us with provisional ballots? Because there's a lot of stress testing I see from different groups kind of testing the system.
Sure, the like inside person that's
Yes.
videotaping it to see if you actually do
Yes.
something wrong. No, it's perfectly legal to give someone a provisional ballot. If you don't, you're not telling them, we know for sure it's gonna count. They didn't say it's for sure gonna count.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting that it would be illegal. I'm just
Yeah.
suggesting that that could be used against the system to talk about, they've probably done this with some of their friends.
Well, you know, people can twist anything. But to say that I was given a ballot, and then if they, you know, go back later and find that it actually, you know, was not accepted, then the proof would be, yes, we gave you the provisional, but we can show you it was not accepted. You know, maybe there's some of that testing going on. They also, by the way, they get records from social services, from the death records. They check immigration status. When you do same-day registration, they check, they're like checking a lot. It's amazing how much work goes into it. And they stress so many times, elections are not just once a year. Your election directors are working year round on making sure the lists are correct, on pulling out people who have death certificates, on adding people who are changing address. You know, all these things that go on year round. You know, Michael Dickerson is not just, you know, working the month up to the election. He's working year round, you know, I mean, sometimes overtime. And so, yeah, I think that the questions, I mean, if they're testing us, you know, we've got great answers. We got great answers. They can test what they want. And then just a few, a few of the things that the Carter Center did on the 2020, 2021 actually voted, Georgia Senate runoffs. Again, the average election worker has worked in 7 elections, and that's true as a true stat. We can trust them, they're our neighbors. That's a cute one of the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets and the Georgia Bulldogs, you know. We can get along even though we're on different sports teams. So that's really it's about thinking long-term, forming cross-partisan groups like Braver Angels, like crossing party lines, working together, strengthening shared identities, working cross-partisan, and trying to not demonize people. I skipped over this one, but they just gave us an example of shared identities after the synagogue murder in Pittsburgh. This came out from the Steelers. Sorry, I get emotional just seeing how it's just so nice to see that the sports teams are also supporting unity and communities pulling together when there is violence. And so that's our current map of the districts that are fairly evenly split, Republican, Democratic. There's one that's competitive. But you know, you can help you can go on that website, sign the principles. You can sign up for the virtual event on Monday, and you can get a recording. You can hear all those election questions answered. You can help retweet. The State Board of Elections has this Twitter sign, and they've done a lot of myth busting on Twitter. You know, you can retweet that and, you know, talk about things that are actual real information, and just help be part of not treating the other side like a demon. I tell you that if there's anything that I've learned through this whole process, because I've worked with a lot of Republicans in this whole process, there's a lot we agree on. And it gets amplified by the media because the media is all about conflict. That's how they get you to click. That's how they sell advertising. If they get more people to look at the fight in the hall, then they're going to sell more ads because they can show they have more viewers. So let's not spread that kind of disinformation. And when you want to say an expletive about Trump or whoever, just think twice who's in the room. And also that they're, these are real people with families and they care about things, they care about the future. And we differ on policy. We may not agree on voter ID, for example, but we can have a civil conversation about why we think it's discriminatory, or I think it's discriminatory, but why other people think, in the end, if it was going to remove that whole distrust, why don't we just go ahead and make it easy to get one and do it, right? We can have that conversation. And that's what we're hoping comes out of this. One last thing, I know I probably need time for questions. The case before the Supreme Court, and Judge Lewis may know a little more about this, but Moore v. Harper is trying to establish the ability of our state legislature to draw district lines without judicial review. They claim that the state legislature, that our Constitution says that's not contrary to the U.S. Constitution. The state legislature should be able to decide that. They should not have judicial review, should not have a governor veto. If the Supreme Court agrees with that, we're going to have gerrymandered districts forever. Right? I mean, John, you want to add anything to that? It's, that's, and so Mike Collins interviewed a guy who's written in the Atlantic, North Carolina is a warning. That was his article. And if that passes, right now there are 23 trifecta Republican legislatures, which means both House and Senate and the governorship are all Republican. There are 14 Democratic trifectas. So if this passes, then those seats of power will remain like that for the distant future, as far as I can see. So this is a really important case to follow.
And you'll have to move to Massachusetts.
Pardon?
So then you'll have to move to Massachusetts.
I'll move to Massachusetts.
Just
No,
pretend
I'm
you're
staying
an
here.
immigrant and go to Texas.
They'll fly you there.
I have a question.
Yeah. Time for questions.
Yeah, so two quick
You can
ones.
take it.
What does the Carter Center have a strategy on how to deal with the media? Because the media, I think, is like number one at disseminating misinformation. And then my second question is really about how are you guys reaching underrepresented communities in your town halls?
Yeah. So first on the media, yes, they work with a group called Over Zero. That is a communications company focusing on de-escalation. They have a whole guide for the media about how you report on political campaigns and how you report on violence. And just interesting things you wouldn't think about, like when you talk about violence, don't say violence erupted. That makes it sound like it was just spontaneous, natural occurrence, right? No, you have to name who is responsible for the violence, right? You don't just say it erupted. I mean, things you don't think about unless you're a journalist. But Over Zero has a whole guide that we've been sharing with the media.
Are you guys interested in going after them legislatively? Because it can be slander in some respects. I mean, how do you make the media, can you pull their license if it's opinion and not actual?
Going after the media legally, there are a number of groups doing that. I mean, Twitter and Facebook, and there've been a lot. They've been congressional hearings on the Facebook irresponsibility and promotion of misinformation, that kind of thing. So there are enough people doing that. The Carter Center doesn't have to jump in on that. But absolutely, we should have stricter guidelines for media and also people reading it and watching it. Don't click. I mean, they're counting our clicks.
Clickbait.
So exactly. So if it's something that looks spurious or is amplifying something is different, try to find another news source. Don't click on that one. That's just one idea. What was the second question?
About underrepresented communities
Oh,
reaching out with
underrepresented
your
communities.
town
So we're
halls?
partnering with people like the New World Project, the New York Climate Project, League of Women Voters. We're working with a bunch of groups that are focusing on underrepresented communities, trying to get to them. We know that they don't all have digital access. We just don't have the resources to go out like in person, but we're hoping the people we work with on our network are helping. Yeah, Judge.
Are y'all involved or have contact work on an institute of leadership?
Yeah, Brad Young is on our network. And I did a short thing for him. He's been in our circle and yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Going back to the thing that's going on with Alex Jones and he's been in charge of falsifying information. You think if more that situation happens, you have to be responsible for what they're saying?
Yeah.
Anymore?
Can you recap?
Accountability, yeah, the question is about reporters being called to the carpet because of misinformation and disinformation they're spreading. Absolutely. We need to hold those folks accountable. They've shown the best way to counter misinformation is to talk about how unreliable the source is and then get the good information out. So there are different ways to do it. You don't want to repeat the bad information. You don't want to keep repeating something bad because people just hear it and they think it's real. So you don't repeat it. But what you say is, you've heard a rumor about whatever issue from this very unreliable source. They've been shown to be unreliable. Here's what is actually happening with your elections. So you don't repeat the lie about, mules taken, whatever, but you say, here's what's happening. There are audits all the time. There are double checks and triple checks. I've heard it from several different election directors who do this all day, every day, the experts. The folks who are asking about the Albert sensors, they're not cybersecurity people. They're just repeating words they heard on a Facebook page. And if you went up and asked them, what do you really, why are you worried about the Albert sensors? They would go, well, I don't even know what they are. I just asked.
Is there like a Snopes for like fact checking and stuff for
PolitiFact.
PolitiFact.
PolitiFact is a good check. Yeah, Kevin.
Jennifer, two things. First of all, thank you for the information you shared today. I was especially encouraged by the fact that you had deniers showing up at these meetings. I think that's a positive step. But how are you going to assess what your success is? Will there be a state by state, the 4 states, a report that comes out?
Absolutely. They're all about data. And so we are keeping track of all the meetings we have. You guys will go on my report
Wonderful.
of, folks you reached out to, who, how many Republicans, help me, how many Republicans are in the room and how many Democrats? So,
Rotary is apolitical, so.
Right.
And how many independent, how many independents?
How many
are
independents? How many
Yes.
independents? Perfect.
Yeah.
So, I'll say it's a totally mixed group. We definitely want to have Republicans, Democrats, old, young, white, black, gay, straight. We want to have as many different people in our community who represent our community to hear this message. And so, yeah, so we're taking careful note of who we've met with, all the different town halls we've done, the questions that have come up, the attendees, the deniers. We actually had a gentleman at our first town hall with him with a box under his arm. His name was Ivan. He spoke with a Russian accent. I'm not kidding you. And in the box, he had copies of 2,000 Mules, which is the conspiracy theory video that was made saying that the Democrats hired 2,000 mules to harvest ballots all over the country. And, many different media sources have looked at all the different things, so there's no evidence to back it up. We know there were over 50 lawsuits around the country about illegal ballots and fraud and conspiracy. Not a single one of them bore any fruit whatsoever. So these are all facts that we know. But there have been deniers and there have been skeptics, and they've asked some tough questions. And our hope is that they will go out and tell their friends that, I'm still not so sure about those machines because I haven't looked inside them, but I had a bunch of people telling me that they do audits and rechecks and they hand count, and they do all this kind of stuff. And so, I think I will go vote.
Does anyone seem genuinely swayed by the statement that none of these civil cases have resulted in any findings of impropriety?
Yeah, I was actually gonna ask, are you doing pre and post surveys for people who visit the town hall?
Yeah, we're gonna do we can't do pre-surveys because some of us show up. But we're doing post surveys for sure. And we're working with public opinion strategies to do focus groups ahead of these town halls. And you know what is so distressing to me? And they do Democrats and Republicans, and they're different issues. Democrats are worried about access and fairness. Republicans are worried about security and hacking and that kind of thing. But every focus group that I've listened to, and they did them in Florida, they did them in Arizona, people distrust government. They really, really do right now.
That's not new.
It's a very difficult time. And they also say one of the reasons is that they think politicians make a bunch of promises and they don't do anything about it. And they don't feel like government touches them, not meeting their issue. They feel very disconnected. And this is something we can all work on. We can all work on helping people feel more connected to government.
One more question
Yeah.
from.
How's been your turnout for these?
So it's varied. Our best turnout so far is Charlotte.
Bring it.
Bring it. We've had between, our lowest turnout was Albemarle. We had 25 people, that included the panelists. We've had 40 to 50 at most of the events, which, during the weekday election, boring. I mean,
Right.
I mean, to the average person, elections are kind of boring. So we've been really pleased with that kind of turnout. And they tell us when we go to Southern Pines, they're expecting 200 people there. Because Moore County has very active political parties. They've got the Pilot is a big paper down there that's really touting the event. They've got some universities in the area. So they may have, a couple hundred. But it's generally averaged about 40, 45. And then you have the panelists. And I tell you what's interesting is the panelists, because we had attorneys, we get board members of elections, and we get election directors and the cyber person. They love hearing each other's stories. Like, and Bob Orr has mentioned this. One of the best things we're doing is showing our election workers we care. And they are professionals, and we are here to support them. We are here to support them. So, we've lost 43 election directors in the last 2 years because they've resigned because they don't want to deal with the hassle. 43 out of 100 are brand new since 2020. And they're getting besieged by FOIA requests. I want to see the cast vote record from 2020 for, Yancey County or, whatever. They're just more and more FOIA requests, and they can't answer all of them. First of all, the cast vote record is confidential, and it's not considered secret ballot. You don't release that, but for some reason they want to see it. But there are so many things that are spurious questions that they're getting overwhelmed by. So the other advice was that if during an election you see something going wrong, and I don't know what unaffiliated voters do, because the Democrats and the Republicans have legal war rooms set up in an election, and you call your party, and they're going to get the attorney on it. So you don't overrun the phones for the election director. But if you're unaffiliated, just pick one and go to the Democrat or Republican Party and say, I have a question about harassment going on, whatever. If you're there at the polling site, you see intimidation, you can tell the chief judge, you can get someone to go in and say, there's somebody out here. We had someone with a gun show up. Oh, this is one more funny story. Okay, then I'll stop. So last night we had Beverly Earl on the panel, and she was telling the story about someone showed up with a gun at one of the polling sites. Michael Nickerson tells the story too. And sat with his, put the gun in his lap, sat in his chair and just, 50 feet away from the door, but just sat there with a gun looking at people walking in. And the chief judge went out and said, I'm going to have to ask you to leave because you're scaring people. We already have free, fair access. And so he left. Then he came back and they had to call the police. And the police removed him. And Beverly Earl is telling this story and she goes, he's my neighbor. And she said,
holding your neighbor.
And she said, we knew he was crazy, but we didn't know he was that crazy.
Wonderful.
So,
Hey, how about
that's a good
a
story.
big round of applause? Before you leave, Mayor, we want to give you our coin.
Unfortunately, it's just a four-way test. It doesn't have will it be fun, but you can always, when you look at that, remember it and think about it. But more importantly, I wanted to give you this recyclable bag that's emblematic of our club and our commitment to having a sustainable environment. I know that's a passion of yours. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Please.
Goodbye. See y'all.